Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to another video on the subject of Skywave Linux. Today we're going to talk about the release of Skywave Linux version 4.1. This is essentially a bug fix release with a few extra additions and tweaks thrown in for good measure. We're currently looking at the desktop. The picture is a starry night sky over the radio telescope in Nancy, France. Let's open a terminal and go into VimWiki and take a look at a few notes about this release. By the way, the default terminal is now Alacrity. It looks good, it's fast, it works great. When you open a terminal and type VimWiki and execute, what will pop up in version 4.1 and later of Skywave Linux is this index page. The text format is Markdown, and it's really simple. It's simply a page that advocates taking notes, and down here are some internet references where you can go and learn a bit more about how to use VimWiki. The purpose of this update, again, is to fix things that are broken and take upgrades if available. Friends, SLNW, Skywave Linux is not Windows. I'm not even close to cutting my hair and going mainstream with this. I'm not pretending to assimilate with slick graphical environments. This is not a Mac system. We're not using KDE Plasma or GNOME. We're using a rather stripped-down version of Ubuntu and a tiling window manager called i3. You must use the keyboard hotkeys to navigate around and do things, and it's very efficient and quick in this system. There are a few things that you can use the mouse for, but not many. I've gotten messages from a lot of users that have simply downloaded it, popped it into their computer and started it up, and they complain, oh, I can't close Windows, and this doesn't work, that doesn't work. They haven't done their homework to understand how i3 works. You must learn and use the keyboard. To close a window, you don't click on an icon on the window frame. No, you go to the keyboard and use Super Shift Q. That's how you do it. And to get a menu, well, there's no icon to click to bring up a menu. You use Rofi, and the way to do it is come up here to the top left into the empty space. Right click, you get Rofi. Do a 2-finger tap on your touchpad. If you're on a laptop, you get Rofi. Or on the keyboard, Super R. That brings up Rofi. And then you simply navigate down to find the icon for the application you want. And by the way, Rofi has fuzzy sensing. It sees what you're starting. And anything that you use frequently goes to the top of the list. Things that you don't use go to the bottom. So when you bring it up, over time it becomes more efficient. The things that you are most likely to want appear at the top. And there's also a line here you can start writing in things like maybe Gqrx, for example. I've got a window open with Gqrx sitting idle on the scratch pad. That's why you see this. But look here. There's the icon for it. Suppose we don't want Gqrx, but instead we want cubic SDR. Hey, look at that. There's cubic. How about an internet search with Surfraw? Well, there it is. Start typing. It'll figure out what you want and offer you choices. So some of you are out there frustrating yourselves because you have an expectation that this will function like a familiar Mac or Windows or perhaps a Linux machine with KDE installed or GNOME. This is different. Make friends with your keyboard, put the mouse down. After a while, you'll develop some muscle memory and things will go very smoothly as you go up the learning curve. Hardware support. The system has a recent real-time kernel, 5.91. It has extra drivers and firmware installed. It will run very, very nicely on a lot of equipment. If it won't run on your machine, toss your machine into a dumpster and find a Linux-friendly machine. That's my constructive advice. I've been there before. I started using Linux about 15 years ago when the landscape of drivers was nowhere near as good as it is today. It was difficult to get my Wi-Fi working. It was difficult to get my monitor working the way I wanted. Today it's very different. The hardware support is very nice. The default Ubuntu systems are nice, and this thing, Skywave Linux, works great on compatible equipment. If you're having trouble with this, you're probably going to have trouble with a lot of Linux. Dump that hardware today and install Linux-friendly hardware. Let's talk about the main upgrades. There's the real-time kernel 5.91. The SDR drivers are the latest SOAPy SDR and GR Osmo SDR releases. Those are from the Ubuntu repositories. i3 has had some tweaks. We're using the tabbed arrangement. There are no longer auto floats. In version 4, the web browser, file manager, and terminal floated by default. It was bothering some of the users, so I took that out. Now every window opens as a tiled or tabbed window. If you want things to float, you must use the key combination Super, Shift, Space, and the window will float. Not only will it float, but it will also come up in proportion to your screen resolution. That's a change. There's no native i3 support for scaling the floating windows. So previously the size was hard-coded. Users with small or low resolution monitors were having trouble, and users with high resolution screens were unhappy with the size. So now the proportions are written in as percentages in the i3 config file. With those percentages, this system will look at the screen resolution and appropriately scale the width and height of any floating windows. Firefox has been updated, and the bookmarks, especially for the many Web SDR and Kiwi SDR servers, those are updated. The operators frequently change ports or change URLs. I think they're developing into a more centralized system as far as the Kiwi SDR goes. Many of them are using a reverse proxy service offered by Kiwi SDR. So as they do that, I'm updating the URLs to keep up. If you click on any of those servers, you should get a proper response and see the SDR load pretty quickly in your browser. The Dark Reader plugin has been installed. It makes reading text on the web a bit easier on the eyes. It'll give you a dark background with light text, similar to what you see here on the screen. Container tabs are a privacy enhancement in Firefox. It prevents pages opened in one tab from accessing data for pages opened in other tabs. Gqrx has been updated to version 2.13. The update was taking quite a long time to get into the Ubuntu repositories, so I abandoned the wait and simply installed an app image. So Gqrx and Cubic SDR both operate from app images. It's perfectly seamless for you as an end user. You simply click on the icon or enter lowercase characters Gqrx or Cubic SDR, and the applications will pop up and run, no problem. Alacrity is set as the default terminal in Skywave Linux 4.1 and later. It's fast, lightweight, works great. Mate Terminal and Xterm are still available. If you want to operate those, you simply need to click on the icon or open up Alacrity and type in the name of the terminal you want. You'll get it. NeoVim is the default code and text editor in Skywave Linux. It's perfect for writing code, text for other people to read, or hacking your SDR software. The NeoVim plugins have changed since version 4.0. Airline has been replaced by Lightline, and NeoVim has been configured overall for more speed. There's good support for Bash, Python, Go, Java, JavaScript, and other languages. There are enough plugins to help you write with ease, but there are not so many that they weigh down and slow the performance of NeoVim. Start time overall has been reduced by about 60 milliseconds. There are some lesser updates that have been included in this version of Skywave Linux. The SDR scripts have been refined slightly. The bash code has been tweaked and improved just a bit. I've trimmed off a few milliseconds from the execution times. The volume controls have been adjusted for consistency across different sound interfaces. In Pulse Audio, we've gone from 5 to 3 main audio buses. Previously, I had added 4 additional audio buses called VACs here in Skywave Linux. Those have been reduced to 2, and in exchange I've added 4 loopback buses. Cutting down to 2 virtual audio lines and adding 4 loopbacks greatly increases your ability to route audio inside of the system. It's much more flexible than earlier versions of Skywave Linux. Having the 4 audio lines was nice if you didn't mind going into the terminal and manually configuring the loopbacks. Now that they've been put in by default, all you need to do is open Pulse Audio Volume Control. That's PAVU Control. Go in there and look at all streams, and you can route the audio any way you want. Just as an example, I'm currently running 2 separate audio lines. I have Gqrx on one with the volume reduced, and I'm using a USB microphone with the levels raised just a bit. So PAVU control plus loopbacks on a couple of audio lines. It's a great way to configure the sound for making recordings or routing sound into a software decoder. A USB reset helper has been installed. That's a nifty little utility that works with the FZF Fuzzy Finder to allow you to do no-yank resets of your USB devices. In other words, if you have an RTL SDR plugged in, you can reset it without pulling it from the jack and plugging it back in. When you bring up the USB reset helper, you'll be presented with a Fuzzy Finder sorted list of devices. You simply move through that list, select the device you want to reset, and execute that, and the device resets. You don't need to touch any hardware to do it. In fact, let's go to the terminal and take a look right now. Control-Alt-T, there's a terminal. We're currently in a tabbed arrangement. Let's change and go to the tiling arrangement. I'm going to enter USB reset. And there's a list. Simply move up or down in that list. Let's do something else. We'll float so that you can see more information on these devices. So we simply select up or down in the list to find the device to reset. How about something that we don't really need right now, the webcam? So highlight it, execute it, and that fast it is reset. And there have been some adjustments in the behavior of the bash shell for normal versus root usage. Let's go back to that shell again. So as a normal user, you'll see the very pretty colors and symbols provided by the Powerline Go utility. Now, if I go in as root, the fancy Powerline prompt disappears and you're presented with a more Spartan root prompt. So there's no mistaking when you're operating as root and when you are the normal user. Okay. Let's talk for a moment about Gqrx. Gqrx is installed. It runs by app image. And it's all very nice. There's one catch in that the colors don't quite match the GTK themes or the Qt themes in the rest of the software. No problem. The program runs great. In fact, let's see it for a moment. 117.0, there's a weak VOR station in there that I see very experienced with. And colors, DSP and things. Right now we're just on some flyers here in the chat. So there's not much to do right now, but the Gqrx works fine. One more thing while we're on the topic of terminal interface software. There's another very nice application called LF, which is installed. It's the file manager. I'm going to bring it up right now. In fact, let's go to a different workspace. We're currently on workspace 1. Let's go to workspace number 2. So Shift, Super, 2, and that app has been moved. Let's maximize it. So LF is discussed quite a bit on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet. It's fast, lightweight, does a good job in helping you manage your files. You can find files, inspect the contents if they're text. You can use them. You can do all kinds of things here with them. We're currently looking at the dot files in the home folder. So these are great. Notice that some of them actually do come up with syntax highlighting. Let's find something. There's bash history with a bit of syntax highlighting. If it can identify what the file is, it will highlight the colors and separate out the different kinds of functions and things in the syntax. If it's not sure what it is, you'll just see white text. What else do we have here? Let's go in. This is a this is a Jupyter Notebook file. Another Jupyter Notebook. Hey, look what I found. This is a binary file. It's a photo or a picture. I couldn't resist putting that in there. Hey, you don't have to go home. Just GTFO the White House. You don't have to go away mad. Just go away. Q to exit. Left to move up a directory. And that's it for that one. Let's quit that application. We'll go back to our briefing on the upgrade, and we'll get back on track here. VPN and proxy upgrades. The system proxy pre-run and post-run configs are more robust. We have Siphon and Lantern, which work with Firefox. When you run either of those, they make changes in the background before Firefox opens. It configures Firefox to use certain ports for carrying data for the web pages you're visiting. And there's also a SOX proxy involved. Those are configured before Firefox opens, and when you leave those applications, there is a bit of cleanup action which occurs. So those have been made a bit more robust and efficient. Siphon Tunnel Core has been updated. It now offers you more egress points. It's important when you use that application to use a good egress point depending on the material that you're looking for on the web. Different countries block different websites. It does you no good to be in one place that's got a restricted internet and have your web activity come out and be blocked again. So I've changed the list just a bit, and in fact there were more locations that worked, so those are in the list. WireGuard management has been made a bit more easy with bash aliases. You can copy your configs into the WireGuard folder with a simple 5-letter command. You can bring up or bring down particular interfaces with a 3-letter command. I'll demonstrate that later. Searching and finding files have been improved. You have the FZF, Fuzzy Finder, FD, or FD Find, as you may see on the internet, and ripgrep. Those are all set up. They're great. The Fuzzy Finder will list things or process lists and offer you choices according to what you're starting to type on the command line. FD is much faster than the default find utility in Linux. Ripgrep is a very effective utility for searching inside of files for snippets of code or phrases or text. Surfraw is a nifty search utility. There's plenty of information about it on the internet. I've added it to Skywave Linux 4.1, and I've also created a few small Elvi, that's plural for Elvis. I've added a few Elvi programs to help search call sign databases, ADSB data sources, etc. So things that are useful to radio enthusiasts and open source intelligence people. With a few simple commands, Surfraw can run a search for an aircraft registration, an amateur radio call sign, or find an aircraft based on its ADSB hex code. You start Surfraw in the terminal with a short command, and it will either open Firefox and show you a website, a more graphical website with maps and things, or if you're just searching for text, you can use W3M and read your results in the terminal. To pick which browser you want to show you the results, you either use SR to search for results in W3M or Surfraw to see your results in Firefox. Let's go and do a search now, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Control-Alt-T for the terminal, and let's try something here. SR, Snopes, and Voter. It's currently mid-November 2020. There should be lots of material about this on the Snopes.com website. So 3 words to start the search. Execute. It's already gone to W3M, and it's looking. We should see something shortly. Snopes.com comes up, and in text mode, we see a presentation of some data here. Use the keyboard, scroll down. Are U.S. truckers planning a nationwide strike over Thanksgiving? That came up on November 13th. Fact check. Is this a photo of a Nazi flag from the Million MAGA March? November 14th. So you get the point. Let's exit W3M. Let's try this in Firefox. Surfraw. Snopes. Voter. We'll make that float. Firefox is obviously a slower application than W3M, but then Firefox uses a lot of graphics. It shows you pictures, maps, runs JavaScript, does a lot of things that W3M does not do. Any day now, any day, we'd be happy to see the results. I'm going to scroll down. Let's see what we see here. Conservative group alleging voter fraud ends its lawsuits. Maybe there wasn't so much fraud anyway. Did Mike Huckabee write a letter to Biden about voter fraud? Trump wrong on Georgia, voter signature checks. Military voters fear they're part of unsupported fraud claim. So the search worked. Snopes is up, and there's lots of content here for results. Close the window with Control Q. Let's try something else, a little bit different. Surfraw. Let's look at the list of LVs first. And let's float this window. So here's the list of the various LVs. Financial ones, there's Zacks, Yahoo, FinViz is in here. So you can look up things that relate to business or markets, economic activity. There are coding searches such as Arch Package and Arch Wiki. Bugzilla. CNN and BBC are in here. Let's try a call sign lookup in Firefox. Surfraw, QTH. W1AW, Whiskey 1 Alpha Whiskey. That's a call sign many of you will be familiar with. Firefox is rendering. Let's float the window. Shift super space to float. FCC call sign lookup by KA9FOX. W1AW ARRL Headquarters Club. 225 Main Street, Newington, Connecticut, 06111. Well, there it is. There's even a photo. So that's an example of Surfraw in action. You can do a lot more than look up call signs or aircraft registrations or rumors. It's all a matter of what can you imagine, what can you code. Well, let's close this up here. Control Q to close the window. What I want to do now is talk a bit about backups and installation. We run Skywave as a live environment. Timeshift is installed for backups or manual installations. If you want to move out of the live environment based on booting ISO files, you can use Timeshift. Back up the file system onto a separate medium, have a big USB stick or SSD, put it on there in a folder, and then you come back to Timeshift and use that to restore that file system onto the medium that you want to use as your daily driver. So if you have a partition on your computer that you want to set up as a bootable Linux file system, use Timeshift and restore onto that, and it will take care of everything. You can also use rsync to install the file system. That's a more simplified version of what Timeshift does. Use rsync and write those files onto another medium. In normal operation, you should save your files onto a separate drive because they will vanish on shutdown. This whole file system, your home folder, all of that. It's just a ephemeral construct. It's going to disappear when you shut down. I have run on multiple ISO files for years and years and years. It's no problem. I simply keep all of my media on a separate partition on my SSD. Text files, presentations, audio files, video files. I just keep them on a separate location. I can start, shut down. It's no problem. Every now and then when I'm brain dead, I'll leave something sitting in my home folder that I want, and I'll shut down and wipe it out. That's happened once or twice. Using a Casper RW partition is another way. So you can still run the ISO and have persistence with Casper RW. RW means read and write. For persistent multi-ISO devices, see the Chris Titus video. Search for multi-boot USB on YouTube. You'll find it. You'll probably find a few others as well. They talk about using the Yumi or Ventoy utilities for making UEFI and legacy bootable devices. I actually use Ventoy here, and it's great. Ventoy will format, install a bootloader on a drive, and then you simply copy the ISO files that you want to use onto it. When you boot the computer, Ventoy will find all of them. It'll go into folders and subfolders and find those ISO files and show you a menu, and you pick the one that you want to run. It boots up, runs, save your media that you want to keep onto a separate partition, shut down. It's all there. You can look at it the next time you boot your computer. In conclusion, Skywave Linux version 4.1 is updated, verified to run well on modest AMD and Intel 64-bit x86 machines. Enjoy the raw, bare metal feel. Watch out for the sharp corners. Bye-bye.